Way back when, before the grown-up phase, we're one best friend. It was
well, hello, Venters. Put your shoes on. Let's go for a quick 20-minute walk together. Yesterday, we learned about Dunbar's number, which basically stated that once you get to 150 people and beyond, it's almost impossible for groups not to start to splinter. Anything below that, you're capable of actually having a community where you know everybody and where you're friends with everybody. After that, it gets a little bit crazy. Today, we're going to talk about the Hawthorne Effect. Guys, in the 1920s, researchers went out to the Hawthorne Works factory, and their goal was to boost productivity by any means possible. They adjusted the lighting, made the room brighter. They dimmed the lighting, making it darker. They offered water breaks. They offered additional breaks. They actually went the opposite way and offered less breaks. Here's the crazy thing that happened. While the researchers were observing the workers in these various modes, they noticed that no matter what they did, productivity rose. It boosted. Isn't that crazy? The ultimate thing that came out of this was the idea that people actually work much harder when they're actually being observed. So over the last couple years, we've had a lot of people wanting to avoid returning to the office. Everybody wants to work from home. You even hear a lot of arguments how they're more productive working from home. But when you think about the Hawthorne Effect, we actually know that you do work a lot more and a lot better when you're actually being supervised. Now, in this study, they believe that it's because people love the attention that they get when somebody is observing them working. I think it's actually the opposite. I think we work harder when our boss is looking at us, because when the boss is away, the mice will play, so to speak. So if you ever hear from this point on people talking about the Hawthorne Effect, it refers to people changing their behavior because they know they're being observed. One of my favorite shows growing up as a young adult was Seinfeld. And one of my favorite episodes is where George Costanza is working for the New York Yankees. And every time somebody walked into his office, he would look at them like he was angry and deep in thought.
Yeah, what do you do all day?
Not that much.
I thought that new promotion was supposed to be a lot more work.
Yeah, when the season starts. Right now I sit around pretending that I'm busy.
How do you pull that off?
I always look annoyed. Well, when you look annoyed all the time, people think that you're busy. Think about it.
And what he discovered was that by looking like he was angry and deep in thought, it actually kept his superiors off his back, because they knew that that meant he was busy and being productive. As a matter of fact, I think he ended up getting a raise and a promotion because of that strategy. If a coach or a girl is watching you work out at the gym, you're probably apt to be a little bit more enthusiastic about it, to work a little bit harder, right? Conversely, if that coach or that girl isn't at the gym, maybe you don't work out quite as hard. Same with the workplace. When the boss or supervisor comes in, you're going to start typing louder and faster. You're going to start thinking out loud, oh my God, maybe I should try these leads. What do you think of that, right? And all of a sudden you're making goofy statements out loud. I've seen this happen time and time again. I noticed with my channel, all of a sudden I'm doing these 90-day walking challenges, right? Well, one of the things that happens when you're in a 90-day walking challenge is you don't want to take days off. It's a 90-day challenge. But what happens is when you do them back to back to back, pretty soon you've been walking for hundreds of days in a row, but at the same time, you know that people are watching you on your channel. So what was interesting is I kind of lived the Hawthorne effect. And I've seen it in work where all of a sudden the boss is there. They're asking everybody about ideas on how you can boost your individual productivity. Hey, Dorothy, give us an idea of what you do when you need to get yourself going. What's some strategies you employ? And all of a sudden, Dorothy says her strategies, and you regurgitate yours, and other people, talk about their strategies, and before you know it, everybody is mentioning different tips that they're doing. In other words, people like to work hard when people are looking. Here's the scary thing. I feel like the camera and the observation itself is starting to lose its power. For example, when I was growing up in the 80s, I don't know if you guys remember this or not, but that's when a lot of department stores started putting up cameras everywhere. That was going to be the ultimate deterrent, right? You've got this camera there to prohibit you from shoplifting, and even if you get away with it, they're still going to be able to look at that footage, and you're going to be able to be prosecuted even after the fact. It was a scary deterrent. Well, we've gotten to the point now where a lot of criminals don't really give a crap if you're observing them or not. They're still going to do what they're going to do. And because of that, I feel like the Hawthorne effect is losing its power. Same with the workplace. Back in the day, people think that you work harder because you want to impress your boss, but in reality, you just want your boss to think that you always work hard, when in reality, when he or she's not around, you're probably just as lazy as the next person. Now, here's what's cool about when I read about things like Dunbar's number or this Hawthorne effect. It gets my brain thinking about other things. For example, we know for a fact that when kids are little, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, it's not uncommon for them to say, "Daddy, Mommy, watch me do this." And it might be as simple as them going down a slide, right? But there's that want for attention. Now, when they're little and young, if you were to feed that attention in a positive way, right? Show Mommy how fast you can finish your homework. Show Daddy how fast you can do 10 push-ups and sit-ups, and show us that you can ditch sugar for a day and go for a walk, God bless it, right? You show them all these positive things, I could see how that would translate into a really productive human being as you get older. Now, I can hear all those entrepreneurs saying, yeah, you're going to become productive so you can go into the school system and become a little slave robot for the American business mind. Greed. What's that one saying, though? Greed is good. Greed probably is good. A lot of the things that we enjoy in this world probably occurred because a lot of businessmen had some greed in their blood back in the day. You got to remember, there's a lot of people that are built for being employees. Not every one of us is built to be an entrepreneur or a boss. And I don't know, I just think a lot of times we look at these companies as these greedy people that are just working us into the ground, when in reality it was kind of this way of life that enabled a lot of us to live into our 70s, 80s, and 90s. And if you were to ask somebody that lived in the 1800s, do you think this is slavery and some horrible world we live in now? They would probably argue that you're crazy, because all their relatives died in their 40s and 50s, and they had to work 6.5 days out of the week. We sure do bitch and moan and complain a lot. That's another reason why I think it's a good idea to get out and take a walk. One thing that's never going to be affected by the Hawthorne effect is your walk. Nobody's going to care if you go on a walk. Nobody's going to take the time to watch you. It's one of those things where you have to be a self-starter and you have to be willing to challenge yourself. But here's the neat thing. When you're walking, you can think about things like the Hawthorne Effect, and you can tell yourself, where was I affected by this? I'll tell you where we were all affected. Every time the teacher handed us a sheet of paper for an assignment to do during class, right? And that teacher would walk around that classroom, it kept your eyes on the paper. It made you want to do your test. Now I want you to think about some of the more challenging schools around the country where the teacher's afraid of the students, where the students aren't so focused, and all of a sudden you have a situation where people aren't trying to impress anybody. And if you go through life and you never try to impress anybody, pretty soon life becomes pretty darn mediocre. Sometimes you gotta put your best foot forward. I think that's where a lot of these younger people are maybe failing. Yes, it's not necessarily cool to always be ultra competitive, but when it comes to getting a job in the interview, sometimes you gotta fake it till you make it. Sometimes you gotta put your best foot forward. You know, I think sometimes young people, I've seen them in a lot of interviews, the number one thing on their mind is, hey, how much PTO time do I get, and when does that kick in? Look, everybody and their brother wants to make sure they get the full benefit of PTO time. But when you're in an interview, your number one thought should be, how the heck can I get this job? How did I get to that thing? I don't know how I get to some of the things I'm talking about, but that's the fun with walking. It just stimulates your mind, and before you know it, you're thinking about a lot of things. Please remember, yesterday it was the Dunbar number. Today it's the Hawthorne Effect. But there's literally hundreds of principles and effects and numbers and different things out there that are going to be so fun for us to talk about. So please, if there's another one that you're thinking would be really fun to have Jesse stumble over, let me know. I think this would be a great way where we can avoid talking about some of those negative things. Because it gets tiresome talking about crime all the time and tiresome talking about political things. You know, believe it or not, there was a time when I wasn't really super political. Sometimes I find myself getting jazzed up by topics that weren't even really big in my life once upon a time. And I'd like to get back to talking about fun things. And some of these things are really fascinating. Yesterday, for example, I never really thought about this, but it's true. When you see that person and they've got 2,000 Facebook friends, it's all a lie. As a matter of fact, for all we know, they could have less friends than we do in real life because they're hiding behind this image, so to speak. And then when you find out that people are lucky if they have 5 to 15 friends. What I find interesting is, how does the modern world, where we're all isolated, how does it affect and skew those very numbers? And then to know that whenever you're actually watching somebody, they're going to try to be somebody they're not. They're going to try to be that Superman. Well, how does that affect something like Facebook too, where we put ourselves up before the spotlight, you know, without anybody having to ask us to? Because isn't that what we're doing when we show people where we ate our meal? Aren't we really saying, hey, put the spotlight on me? You know? Makes you wonder, is everything we see just a lie? It could very well be. Anyway, make sure you hit the like button. Let me know what your thoughts were on the Hawthorne Effect. And have you ever found out that when maybe your supervisor or boss was looking at you working, did you find yourself putting a little extra effort in there? And I'll talk to you tomorrow, guys. Have a great night.